The 30th Annual Alaska Native Art Auction, celebrating Indigenous artists and voices, takes place Saturday, March 21st at the Hotel Captain Cook in Anchorage. Information available at knba.org. The Alaska Native Art Auction Gala is March 21st, 2026 in Anchorage, Alaska. Donate artwork by February 27th, 2026 and be eligible to win $500. Help sustain Indigenous-led media, including National Native News. Donor forms and details are found at knba.org.
Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy. A recent report on the history and ongoing consequences of Indian boarding schools in Michigan tells an all-too-familiar story of physical and sexual abuse, forced assimilation, and an absence of accountability. The report has a list of recommendations that include a formal apology, but the state officials who commissioned the report say it's not up to the standards that the public expects and shelved it. Some tribal officials are also backing away from it. We'll find out what's in the report and why state officials are disavowing it right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. The Senate Committee on Indian Affairs has invited tribal leaders to testify on Capitol Hill Wednesday. As KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio reports, the Northeast Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act is the hearing's subject.
This $5 billion deal would resolve claims for three parties, including the Navajo Nation and Hopi Tribe. For San Juan Southern Paiute President Carleen Yellowhair, this proposal is not just about securing precious water in the Southwest. If passed, it would also set aside 5,400 acres for a new reservation in Arizona.
We want to settle because we want our land, our home, a place to build. We lost all our elders. They started it, and we just want to finish it.
The tribe has more than 300 members, including Vice President Johnny Lehigh Jr.
You know, the land and the water, that's what we needed to become more sovereign.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
The Alaska Supreme Court heard arguments this month on whether prisoners can be forcibly medicated with psychiatric drugs without a court hearing and the right to a lawyer. In the state correction system, Alaska Native people are incarcerated about twice the rate of white Alaskans. Alaska Public Media's Rachel Cassandra has more.
The ACLU brought the case against the Department of Corrections on behalf of a prisoner, Mark Andrews. He says he's been unjustly drugged with powerful psychotropic medication for most of the last 7 years, without due process or access to legal counsel. The department policy currently allows prisoners to be drugged against their will if they are gravely disabled or are in imminent risk for harming themselves or others. Daron Levine is a lawyer for the ACLU. He argued at the hearing that the policy infringes on rights protected by the state constitution.
Few things are more personal than someone's body, and arguably nothing is more personal than a person's mind. It's the locus of a person's identity, and it's a last refuge of freedom for people who are incarcerated.
Under department policy, prisoners have the right to hearings every 6 months with department staff, and they have the right to appeal the decision to a department committee. The ACLU argues that Andrews didn't have sufficient access to hearings or an appeal. Here's Justice Jennifer Henderson questioning Kimber Rogers, the attorney representing the Department of Corrections. Justice Henderson says the facts seem to suggest that the prisoner was denied the rights promised in the department's policy.
How do you respond to that?
Your Honor, I agree that there were definitely some problems in Mr. Andrews' hearings, but I don't think that that supports...
It seems like there were more than some problems. There were long periods of time where there were no hearings, for example.
Well, Your Honor, I would dispute that, actually.
The ACLU lawyer argued that there should be a hearing in a courtroom because the Department of Corrections staff may be biased to protect the institution over the person. But Rogers says a hearing inside prison is the best approach. When the Supreme Court issues a ruling, the decision could apply to the approximately 22 Alaska prisoners who are being forcibly drugged. In Anchorage, I'm Rachel Cassandra.
The National American Indian Housing Council is applauding the House passage of the Tribal Trust Land Home Ownership Act. The bill to improve access to home ownership for Native families on tribal trust land is led by South Dakota Congressman Dusty Johnson and passed last week. Executive Director of the Housing Council, Rudy Soto, says the bill improves coordination between the BIA, lenders, and tribal communities, establishes timelines, and helps Native families, veterans, and tribal members who want to achieve home ownership. The Senate previously approved the measure, and it now heads to the president's desk. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Eighth Generation is a Seattle-based lifestyle brand owned by the Snoqualmie tribe, offering authentic native-designed blankets, jewelry, and gifts. More at Reservation Economic Summit booths 805 and 21 and at 8thgeneration.com, who support this show.
Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. The Gathering of Nations Traders Market will be in the Creative Arts and Lujan buildings both days. Tickets available at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy, sitting in for Sean Spruce. The state of Michigan spent more than $1 million on a 300-page report examining the history of Native American boarding schools and the state's role in that system. The report documents decades of physical and sexual abuse of children in those schools. But now the state refuses to release it, drawing criticism from tribal citizens and others across Michigan. State officials say the report did not meet its original goals, and some tribal leaders say it offers few answers and little new information. Still, the state's refusal to endorse the report could have lasting consequences, closing off what all sides agree is a difficult discussion that needs more public disclosure. Today, we'll discuss some of the key findings of the report and the root of some of its criticism. If you looked at this report and would like to make a comment or ask a question, you can do so by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Marquette, Michigan, is Professor Dr. April Lindola. She is the department head of Native American Studies at Northern Michigan University, and she's Mohawk and Delaware. Welcome to Native America Calling, Dr. Lindola.
Thank you so much, Andy, for having me.
And joining us from Seattle, Washington is Joanne Kaufman. She is the founder of Kaufman and Associates. She is Nez Perce. Welcome to Native America Calling, Joanne.
Hi, thank you, Andy.
Thank you for joining. And also joining us from Lansing, Michigan is Ron French. He is a senior writer at Bridge, Michigan. Welcome to you, Ron.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. And Ron, I want to start with you. You broke this story about the state of Michigan commissioning a $1 million report to investigate the history of the state's Indian boarding schools. And that was all so that they could shelve it. What have you been able to conclude was the ultimate reason the Civil Rights Department backed off of this report?
Sure, and thank you for having me. It's sort of complicated, and it's really because the report was too much and too little in different ways. The state will argue that the group that put together the report, the 300-page report over a couple of years, went beyond the scope of what they had hoped they would do. Including making recommendations to the state as to what they should do, including, a formal apology and subpoena power to try to get records from the Catholic Church. But also on the other side of that, the report, as you mentioned, did not have a lot of new information for people who are familiar with the subject. I think that this report had the original goals had been that this would be the Michigan version of the National Boarding School Report. That was the goal. The product, both because of the time allowed, I think, and also just because of not being able to access documents if they exist. It didn't have as many details about how many people were at the boarding schools, how many deaths there were, those sort of things, and there was really some conflict on whether the report went too far or not far enough on accountability.
Okay. And the decision now by the Civil Rights Department to back off on this report, was that supported by tribes in the state?
There was a mixed bag on that. I think a fair number of the tribal leaders who were involved in the project were not satisfied with the final product. And I think there were various reasons that would be cited. I would not want to speak for them, but from what I've heard in a public hearing and also from speaking to some people, there was some concern, I think, among tribal leaders about a section of the report that quoted a number of survivors and descendants. And whether they had proper authority to be quoting these people, and the names weren't attached, but still there was a concern that people may be identified in some way. And like I said, I think there was some concern that they really did not provide the new information that had been hoped. The most positive thing I have heard from tribal leaders is that yeah, this isn't perfect, but maybe it's a good first step.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I want to take a step back and sort of look at things from a little to help you help us understand this issue. I'm sorry. This report is 300 pages long, and it closely aligns with similar reports elsewhere. There are dozens of interviews, some of them on video. There are public documents, which are often hard to come by when we're talking about events so long ago. And there is a list of recommendations that are in line with other boarding school options, including one from the Department of Interior under then Secretary Deb Haaland, which you mentioned. What more is the state looking for?
Well, I think one of the state's largest concerns in its decision that they did not want to release the report at all, and perhaps Joanne may have a different view of this because she was more intimately involved with this process. But I think there was some concern among attorneys in the Attorney General's office for the state of Michigan that there were segments in the report that listed some either state or local entities that participated in some way, supported in some way the boarding schools, the federal boarding schools. And there was some concern that whether that opened up liability or not, is what I've been told. But as you said, I'm not sure this really goes beyond the scope of what you've seen in other reports. And frankly, from a journalist point of view, if you want something to get publicity, you try to hide it. And that's what they did here, and it's become a bigger issue than probably it ever would have been if they just released it.
Okay. I want to bring in Joanne Kaufman here from Kaufman and Associates. And a note of disclosure, Kaufman and Associates is a current underwriter for Native America Calling, but that has no bearing on our editorial decision to include this topic on our show or the questions we have for any of our guests. Joanne, Michigan state officials are the ones who commissioned this report, but you said you ran into problems along the way in the 2-year process of producing this report. What were some of the main hurdles you faced?
Great, thank you. First of all, Kaufman and Associates has been doing this type of work for 36 years, and we saw the request for proposals, and we won the opportunity to do this work and undertook it, with great caution and seriousness and preparation because of the topic. My grandmother attended Carlisle Indian School. My grandfather attended Choctaw Indian School. I've worked in the healing and recovery movement and understand the generational impacts of the experiences of our ancestors at boarding schools. We because we sign a contract with the state, we go back to the contract language when we begin our work. And so I just want to, and it's very brief, I just want to read you the scope of work of the contract that we signed. There's just 5 little sentences here, but it's, okay. So this is what the contract said we had to do. So this study should serve as a preliminary and exploratory assessment of Michigan's boarding school history and shall, here's the 5 things. 1, provide an overview of the boarding school system and how it operated in the state of Michigan, including the role the state had in its operation. Number 2, highlight the conditions and experiences and enrollment and financial mechanisms for said operations. Number 3, highlight unexplored areas and unanswered questions that will require additional time and funding. The study should incorporate collaborative efforts with tribal communities, which will be critical to gaining insight, guidance, and authentic contributions to the project. 4, produce recommendations, which will be developed in part and with guidance of tribal nations and indigenous communities. And 5, result in a final report which describes and illustrates the landscape of Michigan's boarding school history and which presents proposed recommendations. So those are the things that we're accountable to produce to be, without violating our contract. The challenge we had over, the first year we spent really working closely with the offices of civil rights and with a tribal advisory group. All 12 tribes in the state were asked and invited to participate. Only 10 of the 12 participated, but still, during the first year of engagement, with our archival research, our literature review, we did key informant interviews, and then began to collect survivor and descendant stories through.
Okay. Joanne, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll be back right after this. If you want to join our conversation, give us a call at 1-800-996-2848. The state of New Mexico is launching an investigation into the history of forced sterilization of Native American women. It's a look at one state's role in the federal policy that resulted in the sterilization of thousands of women without consent. We'll find out what's prompted the state to take on the issue and what it might mean for other states on the next Native America Calling.
Join us for the 30th Annual Alaska Native Art Auction, presented by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation on Saturday, March 21st at the Hotel Captain Cook in Anchorage. Enjoy an evening featuring a hosted dinner, an indigenous fashion show, and live music, bringing community members and leaders together to elevate Native artists and voices. Get your tickets or become a sponsor today at knba.org. That's knba.org.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy. Officials with the state of Michigan have dismissed a 300-page report they financed that included testimony from boarding school survivors and their descendants. Today we're looking into some of the reasons why. You can join us with a comment or question by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joanne, just before the break, you were getting into some of the main hurdles you faced during this 2-year-long process of producing this report. Could you continue with that?
Yeah, I can quickly summarize that. The first year was we met monthly with the Tribal Advisory Group through the data collection process, engaging with people, using best practices and informed signed consent, which included opportunities for anybody to withdraw their consent at any time in the process. Some of the change that happened was the beginning of the second year when our relationship with the Office of Civil Rights changed. Staff on their side left and new staff came in, and the Attorney General's office became much more involved. We were cut off then from the direct engagement with the Tribal Advisory Group, and the AG's office kind of led each of our calls going forward. And that's where things got difficult. The findings that we were putting together as our draft report was coming together began to be edited and deleted at the request of the Attorney General's office, including asking us to not include all 34 schools that we identified in the state of Michigan, but to only include the 5 federal schools that were already identified in the Interior Department's study, asking us to not include descendant stories, but only to include survivor stories, asking us to not include references to state and county participation, although that was a theme that was emerging in both survivor and descendant stories with regard to the complicity of local authorities in the tracking down and returning kids who were not attending or ran away or refused to go.
Okay.
Those were some of the examples, and then the other was to reduce the report from the full narrative that's required in our scope of work by eliminating recommendations and dropping it to a very brief 50-page summary. Okay. Those were the main challenges that were encountered. One of the things, is the report easy to read? No, it's not. There was supposed to be an iterative process in the final report and final recommendations with the Tribal Advisory Group and tribal communities. We were prevented from doing that in that final year, but we did want to make sure that the tribes, and this is what we promised the tribes at a tribal consultation meeting, the only interface we were allowed in that second year, because they rejected so strenuously the abbreviated whitewashed version of the 50-page report. Mm-hmm. We promised at that time to everybody in the room, including the state, we would release the full report. The state was standing by us when we said that. They did not object, and they did not object at any point through the remainder of the contract and, until after the report had been released.
Okay.
So, that I can stop there and certainly answer any questions.
Okay. And I want to go back to Ron French real quick. He's a senior writer at Bridge, Michigan. Ron, your outlet published the report on its own. Why was it important to do that?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's a public document that the taxpayers paid for, and they're shelving it. that is a report about just a shameful period of time in our state's history, in our nation's history. For the portion of our public that is not tied in to the Native American tribes in the area here, this may be news to them. And I think for a too large of a share of our population, this seems like ancient history. They don't realize that in Michigan, the latest, there was still a boarding school open into the early 1980s. There are many people who are, alive, who are survivors. This is actually still happening, still having a lot of trauma. We thought it was important for the general public to get a sense of what the conditions really were in those boarding schools.
All right. Thank you for that, Ron. And thank you for joining us. I want to go back to Joanne here. Joanne, did the sensitivity of the topic and the need to balance the quest for truth with the trauma that it might uncover contribute to the pushback that the report is receiving?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that, we provided, we had a team that included many descendants as well of boarding school, PhD level Native researchers. But we provided tried to provide a trauma-informed process so that there were multiple ways for people to offer their stories if they wanted to. All of which included informed consent, but it could be, a one-on-one interview or a group talking circle or, a paper process. It could be done with other people or in a private setting. It could be done on video, and if anyone was interested in video, and this was something that the Office of Civil Rights, the state had asked that they wanted to have, in addition to the final report, a video testimony from some of the survivors or descendants that the legislators might want to see or view in that way, that they might not read the report. For those people who were willing and to do that, and provided their consent, we provided that video option as well. Okay. One of the things that happened, I think, at one of the gatherings is that the state elected to share some of the summary, a collection of some of the videos with the tribal leaders in attendance, which was, and I understand from my team that they objected to that, but that the state wanted to do it. Once it was shown, one of the individuals who was in that video objected strenuously and asked to reverse her consent, which we certainly honored and had it taken out of the collection. So yeah, it's very, it's very sensitive, and it's things that people haven't talked about, sometimes even in their own family, about their experiences. And so, it can be very impactful for them. And then, it's just kind of horrifying now to see sort of the worst case scenario where you have this re-traumatization related to the controversy that the state, I think, has kind of created by not allowing the process to proceed as planned, to have an iterative process for a final report and final recommendations that would have made it a product that everybody had a sense of ownership around.
Mm-hmm. All right, and another quick disclaimer here. We did reach out to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, and they were not able to participate in today's show. I have another question here for you, Joanne, and then I want to go over to Dr. Lindola. Joanne, what are your thoughts on the report's product? What do you think you were able to contribute to the telling of the history of Michigan Indian boarding schools?
Well, I agree. I agree that with some of the criticism in terms of, it's a restatement of what we've already known, that there was, children forcibly removed, that they suffered physical, emotional, and sexual abuse in many cases, and the cultural loss impact that had on language and culture and parenting. But the stories are still important from Michigan, and I'm glad that those were included. We also had, I believe, new contributions to the field with regard to the consistent message around state and local government complicity in the enforcement of participation in boarding schools during that era, and the number of boarding schools beyond the federal presence, I think, is another important contribution for recognizing, at least in Michigan, and perhaps even elsewhere in the country, but certainly in Michigan. Other types of boarding schools were in practice at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I want to bring in Professor Lindola here. Lindola is the department head of Native American Studies at Northern Michigan University. She's Mohawk and Delaware. Dr. Lindola, what are the consequences of this report being completed but not endorsed by the public officials who asked for it?
Oh, yeah. So thank you so much. And thank you to Ron and Joanne for their insights. I actually wanted to lean on two quotes from the report itself. On page 203, boarding school is America's best kept secret. This needs to be standard curriculum. If they can do this to our kids, they can do this to any children. So I would actually turn the question around and ask the listening audience, what is our consequence? What is coming from that based on that one quote? The second quote is right underneath it. With truth and knowledge comes healing. Once we know better, we can do better. And Michigan is distinct, Andy, because of the 1934 Comstock Agreement. According to the report, and it is important to know that Michigan has the only instance where the federal government entered into an agreement whereby the state of Michigan accepted full responsibility for providing Native education without further cost to the federal government. And so I think there's a tie to why Michigan in particular is a vital and central geography to be having this conversation. And I think that the consequences is that it would be a silencing of this knowledge that's essential for professionals going into education, going into social services, writing public policy, and truly understanding how the legacy of the schools in Michigan have influenced the society as a whole, but have impacted the Native and tribal nations and Native citizens who live in Michigan, but tribal nations maybe elsewhere, who are citizens of Michigan today.
Okay. And one of the conclusions from the report is that law enforcement officials were more complicit in boarding school operations than was previously known. Is that a revelation that improves our understanding of how boarding schools worked?
I think it's very important to know that there was hand-in-hand cooperation with law enforcement agencies. I'm not going to say specifically anything from the state of Michigan because my knowledge is actually more federal level of instances where parents were told, we're going to withhold rations, we're going to withhold support from you if you don't give us your students. And those were individuals who were hired by the federal government. So within the state of Michigan, I can't speak to the same level of detail that this report can about law enforcement. But I know in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a community known as Lac Vieux Air Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe, up near Watersmeet, Michigan, you know, the little kids feared for that bus coming to take them down to Harbor Springs. And there's stories of, you know, children running into the woods being told by their relatives, run and escape this bus that's coming, that's going to take you away. And so there were some that were successful in staying hidden and didn't get on that bus taking them downstate to the schools. So the communities at the time knew and understood what was happening and how these children were being taken away. But I don't think our general community and neighbors who are non-native and non-tribal have a clear understanding and how much more their knowledge could be expanded if they knew this distinct history.
Right. So you speak regularly to boarding school survivors. How far do you think has healing come to Michigan Native communities with or without this single report?
It is making its turn. I will say that my mother was Grand River Six Nations in Southeast Ontario, and her father, my maternal grandfather, attended what's known as the Mush Hole in Brantford, Ontario. So as a descendant, I'm recognizing that significance of voices of descendants as well as survivors, right? Canada has done stuff and done work with Truth and Reconciliation. It's not perfect. It's not ideal. But the United States, the state of Michigan, can be doing more to kind of take steps into that same conversation to say, listen, this is our history. It's part of our foundation. And it's one of the reasons why there is a tension between educational institutions and tribal nations. And so we see the data that comes from that in our high school graduation and college graduation rates. We need to heal from that so we can also be contributing active global citizens to the state of Michigan and beyond. And so I think we need to start following in the footsteps of truth, healing, and repair. And this report could be those initial steps towards that.
All right. You can have a look at Ron French's work in the Bridge, Michigan on our website. We posted a link to his story on our website, nativeamericacalling.com. That's where you can also continue this conversation. We'll be back after this break.
Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. The Gathering of Nations Traders Market will be in the Creative Arts and Lujan buildings both days. Tickets available at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
Need help identifying community priorities? Kaufman & Associates' approach to evaluation is rooted in Indigenous knowledge, honoring tribal history, and sovereignty. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're listening to Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy. We're going to take time now to explore Senator Markwayne Mullin's recent nomination to head of the Department of Homeland Security. Mullin is a Cherokee Nation citizen, and he has held office in both the U.S. Senate and the House. If appointed, Senator Mullin will be the second Native American cabinet secretary in history. Join us with a comment or question by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. You can also join the conversation on our social media pages. Let's take a listen to part of an earlier interview with Oklahoma-based political strategist Allen Wright. He is the founder and president of the Hustings Group, and he is Choctaw. He spoke to producer Sol Traverso about Senator Markwayne Mullin's nomination. Wright says the action by President Trump is historic.
Well, I think it's a tribute to our people. It's good that people are recognizing Markwayne as Native American, and I'm thrilled. I mean, he's a proud Cherokee, and he represents his nation very well, and Indian country in Oklahoma. So it's, as a proud Oklahoman and a proud Native American, it's a win-win.
Yeah, and he's well known in Oklahoma, but not so much the rest of the country. What should the public know about him?
Oh gosh, I'm happy to talk about my friend Markwayne. I mean, he is someone who is a very driven, focused entrepreneur. His story took over a failing plumbing service. There's some stories that he inherited this successful enterprise. I mean, he at 20 years old, he'd take over for, his father in a business that was, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And he turned that around into a highly successful statewide enterprise. And my interaction with Markwayne through the years is, when someone is an entrepreneur, there's an instinct, a reflex, and a drive that they have that really is innate. I mean, you can teach entrepreneurship, but I'm convinced that most successful entrepreneurs are born, and Markwayne is a natural entrepreneur, very, very focused, competitive, driven, disciplined, all those things.
And what can we expect from Mullin as leader of DHS, which, among other things, oversees immigration enforcement and potential counterterrorism? What should we expect from him?
Hyper-focus. And Markwayne, Senator Mullin, has been on the news a lot because he's close to President Trump, so he's often a commentator. But he's someone that's going to roll up his sleeves and do the work. I don't think you'll see him, seeking the limelight, maybe as his predecessor did, and some things that led to her, early departure from the department. And he's smart enough to recognize that as well, that was some mistakes that Secretary Noem did. So I think you're going to find him to be, someone that's actively working and not cutting commercials, if you will, with him at the center of it. I don't think being the center of attention is his aim in life.
Yeah, and I mean, what do we know about his track record in office that we can pull from? Are there any highlights in your view?
Well, I think he's been a consistent hawk, from a national defense standpoint, pro-law enforcement, rule of law sort of policy planks. So he's going to be very consistent with President Trump. And I can't give you a literal example, but he's operated in the practical world. He's dealt with our own challenges here in Oklahoma with the McGirt decision and how that's created conflict and complications. And I think Markwayne has navigated that quite deftly. And so I think you'll see him apply good judgment in the application of Homeland Security, which has, as you know, an immense wide array of responsibilities.
Do you see any hurdles for his confirmation in the Senate?
Maybe so. I expect him to be confirmed. He and Senator Paul have locked horns, and I think the Senator Paul's chairman of the committee that he's got to run through. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And, there may be some others that will, be lukewarm on his appointment, but I suspect, particularly given world events and the need to get somebody in that job, that he'll be confirmed.
What does his appointment do for Oklahoma?
First of all, it created a political earthquake in Oklahoma. The domino effect is still being felt. But for us, it should be a point of pride. I mean, we haven't had, I think, one other cabinet secretary. We've had head of BIA. It's good to see a native Oklahoman, rise to, a very, very prominent position in our government.
He's had some controversial moments. I mean, he once challenged a Teamster boss to a fist fight. I mean, how will that play out as a cabinet secretary?
Well, we'll just have to kind of see. He is who he is. But let's go back to the Teamsters moment for an example. I mean, in a good Eastern Oklahoma fashion, he bowed up and was ready to go. But he and O'Brien have become friends now. I mean, he's supporting him. They've gone on joint speaking engagements together. So they've gone from conflict to, stand up and let's fight here in the middle of the United States Senate hearing room to now being partners. And I think that says a lot.
That was a taped interview with Choctaw citizen and political strategist Allen Wright, speaking about Senator Markwayne Mullin's nomination to be the next Department of Homeland Security Secretary. An extended version of the interview will be available on our website, nativeamericacalling.com. Joining us now from Tahlequah, Oklahoma is Wes Nofire. He is the former Oklahoma Native American liaison, a former Cherokee Nation council member, and a former professional athlete. He is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Welcome back to Native America Calling, Wes.
Very good to be on.
You and Senator Mullin are both citizens of the Cherokee Nation. He's received praise from other Cherokee leaders like Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin. What is your reaction to Mullin's nomination?
It is interesting. You have someone who, we've known each other for a while. In fact, families known each other from way back whenever my sister and him actually shared going to high school together at Stillwell High School. So, it's fun when you get to see someone who and are acquainted with reach kind of a pinnacle moment to be in a very important position. And so, we stand behind decisions that are made out of D.C. We're all Americans here, and we just want to support the right decision, the right leader being there. And it's fun being able to see that it's someone that you are acquainted with and know.
All right. In a recent article from the Oklahoman, you described Senator Markwayne Mullin as resorting to outlandish tactics to get attention. What did you mean by that, and how would you describe his brand of politics?
Well, whenever I mention that, and I haven't even read the article, the truth is sometimes when you're needing to get the attention of people on what's going on, you may have to be a little bit more flamboyant to address something that you're passionate about, and that passion comes out in some more flamboyant moments. And I think that's what we've seen. Is that, Markwayne is passionate about things. That passion comes out. It can make some people excited to see it, and some people are saying, you shouldn't have done that. But nevertheless, it drew attention to what's going on. And I think as Americans and as a people that have a 24-hour news service, you don't know what to pay attention to. And so now we get an opportunity to see some highlight reels and pay attention to some things, right? Because a lot of government things that are getting done can be mundane and boring. But that's not to say that we need it all the time. We need these flamboyant moments all the time. And so I think that's kind of where I was drawing that attention to whenever it was asked. He's said some things or done some things that people may have not liked. And I said, well, I may have not liked him either. However, he's drawing attention to an issue. And so if you draw attention to an issue, I think it's important that we take notice of it, and he definitely has a way of getting people to take notice of those issues.
All right. The Department of Homeland Security encompasses immigration, counterterrorism, and even responding to national disasters. How does Senator Mullin's leadership experience play into those functions?
Well, I think you got to go back to just being born and raised in kind of a rural part of America in which our communities they have to bond together when natural disaster happens. We can't rely on sometimes even a 911 phone call because it takes too long for an ambulance or law enforcement to come there. It's gotten better over the years, but you go back 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, you were the frontline defense of your own house and your own community. And so those are experiences that you don't get in politics. You get those ingrained in your DNA growing up. And so saying all that, I think that's a baseline to start with. And if you look at the way he's led his life on developing a business and, in order to be successful in business, you have to take care of what either is good for your company and also what's a threat, because you have employees that rely on you. You have employees that are going to be providing for their family. And so if there's a threat there, you're going to have to defend that and make calculated decisions from a business standpoint. And then you move that into his political arena. He's definitely done the same thing, things that have threatened our country, things that are concerns for our country from the exterior aspect of it. He's always shown that he's been very supportive of putting Americans first and ensuring that our policies and the things that are going to be affecting us, those things are the priority in what he's been doing in government. And so I think that's why he was probably called up for this role. He's been very supportive of the president for many years, all the way dating back for his first run for presidency. So I didn't really see it come out of left field for the nomination. I seen that, well, this is a guy who fits that bill. He supports, he has very good charisma in front of a TV screen. And so as a administrator, moving from being a politician to now an administrative role, he has a vocal box to be able to support his administration that he oversees, being Homeland Security, whenever the need and the time comes, and hopefully doesn't fall into the mistakes that our previous secretary had made, which is sometimes, you continue wearing that political hat, which is ABC, always be campaigning. And, as a politician, that's kind of where you're always thinking at, is how does this make this good for the country? Also, how does it make good for me to continue making good positional changes in a way that I can stay in this role? And you have to take that off because you're not in this role forever. I mean, Kristi Noem's been in there just a little over a year. And so this isn't something you're campaigning on. This is really your campaigning is to protect your agency and your agency making those decisions, the president's making those decisions. So, that's why I consider my hopes and my prayers is that he's able to take the political hat off and be a driver and a focus on supporting and being a support staff for that agency, because that's ultimately what he is. He's a support staff for the agency.
All right. And we have a little bit more than a minute before the end of the show. You both are former professional fighters. How does that experience help as a politician?
I kind of have to make a joke. When you have a professional bout, it doesn't necessarily make you a professional. He did have some professional MMA fights. I think he had 2 or 3. That was my profession. I didn't do anything else. I didn't work. I didn't have any other jobs. It was make or break for me, and I had 22 professional fights. But saying that from an experienced profession, that anybody who's willing to take their shirt off and step into the ring and go mano-a-mano with somebody, you have a lot of self-confidence. And that self-confidence goes a long way in life. And so with someone like him to have the self-confidence to step inside of an octagon and scrap a couple of fights with somebody, that I think shows his character from leadership roles that, hey, I'm very confident with where I'm standing on positions, and I can't be moved. And I think some places like Homeland Security, this is such a place that we can't move. We don't want to see someone in there who is maybe a little bit dances around a little bit. No, these are hardline facts, and these are the hill that I'm willing to die on. And I think having that former experience in a combat sport helps build that character, and that's what I think it brings out of people.
All right. Well, listeners, if you'd like to hear more about Senator Markwayne Mullin, we've had him on our show a couple of times. He was on our show back in 2024 when we did our live broadcast at the Republican National Convention. He was also a Native in the Spotlight back in November 24th, 2015. So lots more information about politics and Natives in politics on our website, nativeamericacalling.com. I want to say thank you to our guests who joined us. We had Dr. April Lindala, Joanne Kaufman, Ron French, Wes Snowfire, and Allen Wright. Join us tomorrow as we look at efforts by some states to confront their role in the forced sterilization of Native women. I'm Andy Murphy.
Scrutiny. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show. Omnie.
Support from Davis Keelan Law Firm, a New Mexico firm standing with Native families suffering catastrophic loss. When tragedy strikes Indian country, we fight to restore stability, dignity, and justice. Bringing a voice to Native families and communities for 20 years. More information, daviskeelan.com.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
The 30th Annual Alaska Native Art Auction, celebrating Indigenous artists and voices, takes place Saturday, March 21st. Corporate sponsorship opportunities are available. Information at kmba.org.